What's up, malt brothers? This is Hoagie Bear the Whiskey Hamster. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about independent bottlers. So, I suppose most of you are familiar with the term independent bottler. Well, of course, there are official distillery bottlings, and on the other hand, there are companies who buy casks, whether they buy casks from cask brokers or buy casks or even new make spirit directly from distilleries, but they buy it and they mature it in their own warehouses, or if they buy casks, they just bottle this whiskey at will and sell them under their own branding. Sometimes, or maybe still most of the time, they are also allowed to give the name of the Scotch distillery, of the single malt distillery the whiskey comes from, but sometimes there's a clause in the contract that they are not allowed to say the name of the distillery, and it's so-called undisclosed distillery bottling. I must say that I live in Berlin, which is in Germany, and we have many independent bottlers, almost as many as Scotland does, in fact. And so I got in contact with independent bottlers pretty quickly at the beginning of my Scotch journey, because we have some stores in Berlin which have been around for quite a while. Exclusive liquor stores or even whiskey stores mainly. Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather. Please excuse my throat noises from time to time. Okay, and yeah, these stores have also had, and to this day still have, their own bottling. So they have from very early on began to bottle their own casks. Not too many, but from time to time, once in a while, they had an own bottling of a Scotch distillery for sale. And so there I got my first independent bottlers. I mean, one should be the oldest whiskey shop in Berlin, is called Big Market, and the owner obviously took pride in his own private single malt bottlings and praised them. And I can quite recall the time when I first entered his shop and stood in front of, like, all unknown whiskies to me at that point. Stood in front of a Lagavulin 16 and a Lagavulin Distillers edition next to it, and asked him what the difference between these two was. He in his very quote-unquote charming way told me, well, you really can't compare these two, but if you buy something, buy one of these bottlings. And then he pointed to his own bottlings, and eventually I ended up with his own bottlings, which weren't too bad after all, thank goodness. Okay, but what's the beauty of independent bottlers or bottlings? It's basically the opportunity to get something special, to get a bottling which you can't get from the official channels, distribution channels, the official distillery bottlings. Either because it's a single cask and the single cask stands out in a certain way, or if it also represents a style the distillery usually doesn't want to promote. And so, as they are mostly single casks or done in small batches, these independent bottlings tend to be how can I say, you don't have the consistency of quality. And so some of them are very, very good, even better than, or can compare to the best, in my opinion at least, to the best distillery bottlings. On the other hand, you really, from time to time, you got these duds, which probably matured in bad refill casks or have other defects, which would have been ironed out if they would have made or put into a big batch of distillery original bottlings, where they won't make much of a difference. Anyway, so I'd like to, yeah, and I like the challenge. I like the uniqueness of independent bottlings. I think many of the distillery bottlings nowadays are going mainstream, trying to find or to fit a certain mainstream taste, and more distilleries use the same what's the name? There's the same barley varieties and the same strain of yeast, and many, I don't know, in my opinion, non-age statement bottlings especially use the same kind of fresh American wood casks, which share a certain same profile. And I get more variety over single cask bottlings, but as I said, there are many duds out there, many mediocre stuffs, okay stuffs, but there are some pearls to be found as well. And sometimes it's not a pearl, but it's a very interesting malt with an interesting maturation that catches my eye, and even if the whiskey is not great, it's still unique, and I really cherish uniqueness in malts. So I'd like to present a couple of whiskies to you, different bottlings, and tell you a little bit about them and why I like them. Yeah. So, and I'll start off with a Glengarry. So let me show you the bottle. Glengarry exclusive malts from the Creative Whiskey Companies, aged 7 years, distilled in 2010. Bought last year, I think. Last year or this year, early this year. And if you look at the color, it's natural color, as most independent bottlings are. Another plus. Non-chill filtered, many are at cask strength or at least higher strength. I don't know if you can see it, but it's not that much of a sherry brown, but more a reddish tone. Perhaps you can't really see it in my light, but it's more reddish because it was exclusively matured in red wine barrique casks, and one red wine barrique cask, and that gives it a unique and very strong red wine note. I wouldn't say this whiskey is particularly great, but it's really unique, and I've never had a Glengarry with this kind of flavor profile. And it's always fun to show somebody who didn't have such a dram before, just to see what's possible and what variety lies in single malts. And it wasn't too expensive either. I mean, it's only 7 years old, but I paid perhaps like 50 euros for it, and it's at cask strength, matured in a very exotic cask, and it's well worth a try in my opinion, without having to inspect whiskey base beforehand. Okay, another one I picked up yesterday is from a Berlin bottler. It's called Speakeasy. Let me put it in focus for you. It's an Ardmore, 8 years old, as you can see, only 154 bottles, bottled for whiskey manufacture, and it's bottled at 46% ABV. And the funny thing is, the shop owner told me that It was quite a nice dram, not super extraordinary, but it had this potato soup starch kind of taste to it, at least in the aftertaste. And I was curious, and it only cost me 35 euros. And so I bought it, and indeed, there's this potato soup starch taste in the background. I haven't had before in whiskey, and beyond that, it's not a bad whiskey at all. It's an easy sipper, pretty nice, alcohol is well embedded, and yeah, I don't regret having bought this, and it's a good bottle to share as it was quite inexpensive, and it's something different. I mean, for an entry-level Scotch, basically, at this price, why give people like the Glenlivet or the typical, excuse me, typical other entry-level bottle if you can give them like a single cask Ardmore, which is kind of special. Alright, so now another one I bought like 1 or 2 years ago is a Kleinlich. Yeah, let's get the focus, yes. It's a Kleinlich, 19 years old, and the special thing is about this one, perhaps you can read it, down below on the left side on the label, wood type Lagavulin cask. So basically you get your Kleinlich, your waxy, typical Kleinlich, 19 years old, not too shabby, from a single cask at cask strength, but out of a Lagavulin cask, and that gives it a touch of, what is it, touch of Rora? Rora was the distillery next to Kleinlich, which they closed, yeah. And yeah, now this Lagavulin cask, usually you have to see with these peated casks used for non-peated whiskey. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but in this case it's a very strong peat influence. I was surprised that they didn't use like lightly peated barley, because it's more than just a hint. Maybe I can show this again, and maybe it's sharp, yes, for all those who are interested in it. Look at it. So okay, anyway, so, and there among independent bottlers, there's also like these semi independent bottlings, meaning that they are mostly single casks, but they get the original label, but the casks are bought from the distillery, but they get the distillery label and only like a mention on the label for whom the cask was bottled. I show you a couple of examples. For example, this Aaron, 21-year-old Aaron, and perhaps you recognize the label in the middle. Let me bring it up. I don't know why the focus isn't working as great as it should be. Yeah, it's selected and bottled for the whiskey base, the latest last month whiskey base bottling. That's how they bought a cask. Natural color, non-chill filtered, also only 180 bottles. Great stuff. Got even better with time and with much air exposure. So benefits from oxygen. And I'm really looking forward. I don't think I've seen the peak yet. Looking forward to trying it soon. And it's probably gonna be even better than before. Alright, another one. Remember the whiskey shop, Big Market, I told you about, the oldest whiskey shop in Berlin? They had their 50th anniversary, like I think 2 years ago. Let me check. Oh, 2015, 3 years ago. 50 years. Just imagine, and they did a special bottling for this. Okay, for this occasion, yeah. And this was, they bottled a 10-year-old. Oh, now I got it. Yeah. Please. 10-year-old Lechic as their anniversary bottling, and it's bottled under the Douglas Lang brand, or particular line of Douglas Lang. And it's actually quite, the ABV is quite high with 65.4%, but it's a great Lechic. And it states basically 50th anniversary Sonderabfüllung, like special bottling for a big market Berlin. Also nice bottling, and a single cask bottling. And then we have this whiskey fair. We have a few whiskey fairs here in Berlin during throughout the year, and one is usually in late summer, and it's called Whiskey Herbst, like whiskey fall or whiskey autumn. And missing the word, the one who's organizing, the organizer of the fair, he is doing his own bottlings, and last year he bottled a 20-year-old very tasty Kleinlish, and it gives a silhouette of Berlin, and it says 2017 Whiskey Herbst, like whiskey fall Berlin edition. It's actually a signatory vintage bottling, but the single cask seasons are exclusively made for Germany, and there are other like bottlers who have also published single cask season bottlings. And this 20-year-old Kleinisch is really nice. Interestingly, if you look at the color, it's very dark, obviously a cherry cask, it's natural colored, but it's a refill cherry butt. So if this is refill cherry, you don't want to know what first fill would taste like. Probably not as good, because then you wouldn't find any traces of Kleinisch distillate in it any longer, which makes it great and really works well. Really nice whiskey. And there's also a classic here in Berlin, and even throughout Germany in a way. There's a Berlin bottler called Lars-Göran Wiebers. He's Jack Weber's Whiskey World is his company, his independent bottling company's name, and Jack actually is his dog. So Jack Weber's is not his name, but it's the dog's name. His name is Lars-Göran Wiebers, and he, like for, I don't know now, 16, 17 years, he bottles this classic of Islay. It always comes in single casks, at cask strength. It's an Islay malt, non-age statement, probably between, I don't know, 3 and 8 years old, I'd say. Can't really say, perhaps 5, 6 years old. It looks like and tastes like it contains sherry cask, at least it's lightly sherried. It's pretty heavily peated, usually pretty good quality, and it's supposedly a Lagavulin. And I hear all people say, oh, Lagavulin don't sell casks any longer. And while that might be true, or most probably is true, he did the contract with the Lagavulin like 16, 17, 18 years ago, when they still were making these contracts and were selling casks. And this contract is not limited, but grants him like a couple of casks a year. And they approached him like numerous times now to terminate the contract, but and like offered him money to terminate the contract because they want to keep their whiskey. But he's smart, and he won't agree, and rather like continues to sell his classic of Islay. And by the way, this cask strength sherried young Lagavulin. This bottle costs about 40 to 45 euros, and for this amount of money it's a real steal. It's a great whiskey, a great young potent Islay with more than just peat, but very nice flavors as well. Okay, the same bottler, Jack Weber's Whiskey World, also released one of the most bizarre, what's the word? Not famous, but infamous. Infamous whiskies, a sample of which I sent to the Scotch for Dummies, the rest of which they sent to the Scotch Test Dummies, and it's an 18-year-old Ben Nevis, which has strong aromas, a strong nose of uhu glue, a certain kind of German glue, and sauerkraut. And everybody wonders whether it's been a moldy cask or something else, but something is not right. It's bizarre, it's extreme, but I in a way like it. You have to be in the mood. It's not an everyday dram, it's an attention whore, so to speak. But it's unique, and this you will never find this in official bottlings of Ben Nevis. And this unbottled at 61 point. Where's the focus? Damn it. 61.2%. Yeah, and it's a Crossel Ben Nevis, and if you want to know more about it, look for a 1990 bottling of Jack Weber's The Crossel Ben Nevis at Serge at whiskyfun.com, and read the whole story and his review, how he dislikes it and doesn't understand what this dram is all about. It's really funny. Okay, slowly coming to an end. So what do I like about independent bottlings? Sometimes it's harder to get these sherry bombs from official distilleries, and while not all young sherry bombs are great, many are very sulfury, flinty, and I don't know, the sherry is sweet. It's PX sherry, sweet but not very well integrated. Some serve as the exception to the rule, and that's, for example, true for this very dark first fill sherry Glentorkers. Glentorkers from a Austrian independent bottler called Single Cask Collection. It's Glentorkers. It's at 55% volume, and it's it's only 10 years old, but it's great stuff. No off notes, and really pleasant, really nice tones of really dark chocolate, a little bit of like this cocktail cherry fruitiness. Wonderful stuff. And as I mentioned, sometimes there are independent bottlings who don't give away the distillery because they're not allowed to, which is true for this North Star Islay whiskey, distilled on Islay, 12 years old. And maybe we can take a look, if the focus doesn't leave me now. We can take a darn, I don't know, I'm sorry, but it says I can read it now. Distilled, matured, and bottled in Scotland, and somewhere it says unchill filtered, natural color, of course, and it's from South Islay. And funnily enough, this is a great Scotch, a very smooth cask strength, very great Scotch, and the wholesaler forgot to like how can I say? Well, the shop owner I know ordered this bottle, And all these bottles, or some of them, which didn't give away the distillery, still said so on the order form of the wholesaler. So they left the distillery on there, um, even though it's not on the bottle. And so he told me this is a Lafroig, actually 12-year Lafroig cask strength. And these are also pretty hard to come by. It's not exactly cheap. It's not a cheap bottle, but it's very good. And I tried it head to head with some Lagavulin 12 cask strength and a Lafroig 10 cask strength and a what was it? Oh yeah, Artback Corrivrechen. And this one blew them all out of the water. Best of them all. Alcohol integrated in the best way, and it really came from just from the profile. It tasted like a Lafroig at least. So it's probably true. Can't say for sure, but it's really great Scotch. And this North Star, the independent bottlers want to look out for. It's very good. They have very good bottlings out there. So yeah, I really love my independent bottlings, and I don't know. The longer I'm into this malt journey, the more I'm away from the original bottlings. Not that they're all bad, but distillery bottlings, the official range is just not interesting enough most of the time. And I think I'm really into independent bottlings because they offer, the uniqueness factor. Something really special and unique, and it's all limited in a way most of the time, single casks. Unfortunately, one thing you can't really do is, so that's one downfall of single cask bottlings and YouTube videos, you can't really do reviews on them because like basically in the world, like nobody can buy them. So there's perhaps there's only 250 bottles, and especially if it's a good bottling, it's sold out very quickly, and only people in Europe can buy it for, I don't know, let's give a time frame for within a month. They have to look at your review and then get the bottling. And so you need these official distillery bottlings who have consistency over a couple of years to really help somebody in their in their choice of whiskey. But sorry, nevertheless, it's great and it's fun. And if you have the chance, I know in the beginning I got in contact with them very early, but still was kind of skeptical. And if you don't know how whether to purchase an original bottling or an independent bottling, just look at whiskybase.com. You will most probably already find your bottling in there, and maybe a couple of people have rated it already, so you can perhaps form a picture in your head whether it's a dud or it's a good bottle. And even if it's an eccentric bottle, or if I don't know, if it features a special cask maturation, it might still be worth a purchase just to get something special out of the ordinary to share. So that's it for now. Thanks for listening to me for this long time and to my hoarse throat. See you later. Take care. See you around. Bye bye. This was Hoagie Bear the Whiskey Hamster for you.